All right, we're back, and it's me, Dave the IT guy. I am back from Black Hat and DEF CON out in Las Vegas. It took me this entire week just to kind of get my feet back out underneath me because, man, that's an event. Outside of walking around and doing a whole bunch of stuff that you've already heard about, there's also some of the hidden things that goes on out there for that week that some people talk about and some don't. There are some private parties that you get to go to. There are some things that happen within a thing that you may not actually hear about often enough. And today, I've got two folks on with me from, well, so I met them at a little private house party. Some dude named Dave Kennedy. You might have heard of him. I don't know. He hosted this thing, and somehow I ended up on the invited guest list, and I don't really know how that happened either, but I'm so thankful that it did. And while they're sitting down and drinking a pop, I ended up meeting some folks that, after just a few minutes of conversation, I realized that they were people that I needed to bring out to you, the people, the listening security audience. No, all joking aside, these guys, one of the first things that they said to me was they hosted an event called VetCon, which is inside of DEF CON. And I'm not going to explain it to you. I'm going to let them do it. Gentlemen, are you with me?
Absolutely.
Outstanding. So there we go. So I've got a couple guys here from, so I'm not going to blunder anything. I want you guys to talk about it. So just take a minute, introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about cyber defense, and I want to jump right into a conversation about VetCon. So take it away.
Certainly. So I'm William Kimball, President and CEO of Cyber Defense Technologies. We're actually a small veteran-owned cybersecurity company. We focus mostly on the government, the DoD side of the house. We're made of over 70% veterans on our team right now, so it's certainly a cause that's near and dear to our heart. It's a lot of us are veterans, myself included, so I know what it's like to be downrange and want to have things securely. So we started the company with that focus in mind of helping our brothers and sisters out downrange to make sure that the devices they use, the platforms that they use, that they stay secure. And in doing that, I was lucky enough, just like you, to run into lots of folks in the industry like DEF CON, DerbyCon, Black Hat, that type of stuff, and build friends over the years. One of those was Jim McMurray, with Milton Security, and him being a Coast Guard vet, me being a Marine Corps vet, we've always talked about how can we help not only the veteran community come back, but then we try to do as much as we can with the hacking community. And one day in a brainstorm, we just had this idea to come in and host a party within DEF CON, an official party to bring veterans together that are in the community, and that's kind of how VetCon started and how we got to meet you, Dave. And then also on the line we got Steve Lackey, our Chief Technology Officer.
Right on. So with that said, and whichever one of you guys don't want to take this question, let's take a minute before we deep dive into other stuff. Let's talk about VetCon specifically. Like you said, it's a party within the DEF CON environment, which, depending on who you are and how you look at things, it's a party for 5 days anyway, just being there. So how are you guys reaching out with VetCon as far as what is your goal? Is it really to bring the veterans into the cybersecurity world, or is it really to just reach out to the veterans in any way possible?
So it's kind of both. So in doing this, we've, of course, run into a lot of veterans that are in the community. The security industry has a lot of parallels to the defense industry. And, I think it's a solid jump for people from the military when they get out to end up into this industry, especially if they've done something technical in the military, and even not. The principles are very aligned. I think you see a lot of people from the veteran community end up into this field. We originally wanted to start how do we start getting these people together? At DEF CON, it wasn't generally a thing, the spot the Fed type environment. So, it was originally not conducive to be the veteran or the federal side in the early years of DEF CON, certainly when we were going several years ago. And you started to see that change with various governments and stuff even having booths there. So, when we came up with this idea, it was at first to, get the veterans together, kind of get that group. Just like you said in the beginning, when you go to DEF CON, there's all these little niche parties of who the areas that people kind of run with. So our thought was to bring that together for the veteran community. And then the next step, this was the second year. The first year, as in any kind of party, any kind of conference, was like, all right, let's see if we can get this going and, just make this happen. So the first year it went off. We had a lot of fun games. We had a Nerf shooting range within there where the Marines had to shoot the furthest back. The Army had to shoot with a glow belt on their head. The Coast Guard and the Navy had to be touching water. We had a little kiddie pool in there, and they had to be touching water. And then the Air Force, had to be sitting in a office chair as close as possible to the targets. Now, there were Nerf guns and stuff like that. But our goal was to kind of make it fun, not just a networking event of people come in, they stand around with a drink in their hand, and they're talking and exchanging cards and that type of stuff. We wanted to make it a fun event. So that was last year, putting it together. And then this year we went a little bit bigger. We ended up having a lot more people show up last year than we expected. So this year, DEF CON fully supporting us gave us a 9,200 square foot room. So we ended up having a blow-up obstacle course in there. We had a big operation table for the medical side you had to pull the stuff out of the operation table like the old game, an archery range, all kinds of stuff. And our goal was to make it a networking event, and pull the military folks together, but make it a fun event where you're doing stuff while you're there. So that was this year. So now we've had 2 successful years of it. I think we've had this year, close to 1,500. Somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people attended VetCon this year within the conference and the party. So what we're starting to brainstorm ideas now for next year. Just like you mentioned when we came on, after Hacker Summer Camp, a week in Vegas at Black Hat, everybody's recovering for the first week. So everybody's coming up for air now and starting to talk about what we're going to do next year. And we're going to try and keep the same idea of keeping it fun, keeping everybody engaged, and not just a normal networking or a get together, but having fun events. But we also want to start looking of how do we help folks in the industry? How do we help military transition from military into the InfoSec cyber community, or those that are in it and in the beginning? How do we help them? Is it an education thing? Is it connections, that type of stuff? And then, of course, one of the big things with the DoD and the military in general is, support organizations. So we're looking at a couple support organizations that we can help with VetCon. We had a raffle this year where we donated some money to the Gary Sinise Foundation. Things like that. How can we help the veteran community in its entirety using this event, and then connect that to the IT world, to the cybersecurity world?
Man, I got to say that I am embarrassed to say that I had to miss this year, even though I met you guys literally the night before. I ended up getting tied up with other interviews, but regardless, next year that will not happen, and somehow or another I will be involved. So I am sad to be that lame that I missed it. So with that said, we'll be sure that throughout this next year, up to leading into DEF CON next year, that we will bring attention to this particular event and what you guys are doing off and on throughout the year, and remind folks what they can do to be involved, or to remind them to be involved, such as myself. So with that said, let's jump right into this tech talk. Let's jump into a little bit about what you guys do as a company, what you do as cybersecurity professionals in general, some of the strategies, some of the projects, etc. So one of the things that I learned about you guys through conversation and through reviewing your website, you highlight an area of the security world called secure design, and it seems to be a pretty predominant focus of what you guys do as a company. So either one of you, if you want to just take a moment and walk us through what secure design means, and even though you probably meant that for DoD type of or government agencies, how would that fit into the overall strategy for a private company of any size?
Sure, and I'll start with this one. That is certainly one of our core offerings that we do a lot of work with, and true to what you're saying, a lot of that is the government work. With the secure design is a large deal to pretty much anybody in this industry, but several years ago, you certainly saw it where systems were being built to serve a mission, and the mission focus took over everything. Security was an afterthought, and you get to where the system is ready to go live, ready to go operational, and security hasn't been designed into it. So then you got to start all over, and the services and all the coding and all that stuff starts getting mixed up, and it doesn't work after you start adding security at the end. So what we look at is coming into the systems, the applications, the devices, the platforms within the government in the beginning, and building security alongside of that development process, whether it's architecture, whether it's coding, the whole design process. That really depends on what type of system it is, what type of customer it is, but it's incorporating things like minimizing the attack surface. For instance, we just had a project we did in the AWS where security wasn't done in the beginning, and we walked in and there were multiple, I'm not going to name the number, multiple databases. As a developer needed a database, he just spun one up. No thought of anything across the organization or, using the same one for multiple instances. So the attack surface of this instance was just huge. So it's coming in, helping redesign that type of stuff, where that could have been mitigated in the beginning when security was added as a thought in the beginning of the design phase versus just throwing things up as a developer needs them. Instituting things like least privilege, hardening the systems, as a lot of systems come on, things are open by default. So making sure they're shut, and then really building resilience into systems. We're at a part in our industry where we understand systems are going to get attacked. And if something can be engineered, it can be reverse engineered. Somebody is from a social engagement is going to get in at some point, depending on what you do. So building resilience into the system from the beginning, defense in depth, different layers. So if somebody, circumvents the edge, how do you stop them? How do you monitor them from getting in further? So those type of things come into the secure design. We've had a lot of customers that have come in and they've tried to build a system, and the government is your best friend, but they have a lot of red tape and they have a lot of compliance in place, which compliance doesn't equal security, but compliance is a very good starting point for strategy for securing things. So we've come in to a lot of clients that we're trying to get through, build a system that is really needed for the folks downrange, and then we help them build it from a secure design perspective along the way as they're developing the things that they need. And then not only meeting the compliance, but actually meeting security. How do you respond to attack, building in the policies, that type of stuff. Steve, anything to add to that?
Absolutely, Bill. And, those are really, really great points. And some of those points I'm actually going to turn the volume up on just a little bit. When Bill mentions that it's important for folks to kind of work together is kind of a message that's hidden in there. Collaboration is something that we see that can certainly be a little bit of awareness, rather, raised on collaboration for folks to work together. And I'll give you an example some of the similarities that we see from system to system when we test them is the thought isn't who in the world built this. The thought is how was this particular system built. We kind of have to give a little bit of reverse engineering thought to these systems, because one of the things we've got to keep in mind when these are built is people come and go, right? And that's kind of lost a little bit in building systems. And what I mean by that is the folks who are building, we'll just say widget A or program B, or writing a little bit of code here, they may only be there for a couple of months, and they don't get the chance to collaborate with the rest of the folks who are building the final product. And that hurts, and it hurts in quite a few ways. And when we're talking about a secure design built in from the beginning, without that collaboration and the communication between all parties, that can certainly hurt the final product, as one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And without that, you certainly can't have a secure design from the beginning. So raising awareness on collaboration and working together, no matter who you are or what your role is in the product delivery in the program, is extremely important. I kind of wanted to touch on that, because that is very important what Bill was mentioning, to keep folks kind of on the same page to run the security from the very beginning.
Well, and you certainly probably read my mind somehow, because one of the follow-up questions I was going to ask was, if you were working with whatever, an NSA, an FBI, whoever, a three-letter agency, some folks come in and do a certain part of the work are going to have security clearance type A, others are going to have type B, C, and D, and whatever. They may not know what the final product is even supposed to look like. They might only know their piece of the pie, and then somebody has to come in and kind of wrap that puppy up and make it a nice little present. Do you see that happening in any of your engagements?
100%, Bill. If you don't mind, I'll give a real world on this one. I won't give any names, but as Bill mentioned, for databases, databases are built all the time. And for your example, David, if somebody comes in and throws 3 or 4 databases together and gives access to the world, and those are not communicated with the rest of the the folks in the program, it can absolutely hurt. And the real world example I'll give you is one of the most common attacks nowadays when databases are involved, of course, is SQL injection. SQL injection, we'll find it every time if there's databases out there that the folks who are primary, we'll say project managers, program managers, that don't necessarily know some of the components that were built and are either lingering out there or were meant to be part of a program and were never communicated. That can be our doorway in. And many times when we're dealing with databases, it's absolutely our number one way in.
What's some of the, well, let me rephrase that question before I even start it. Knowing all of the things that you both just said, if I wasn't a government agency with all of the many layers of oversight and redundancy and whatever else, but I'm company A, B, or C that may be much smaller, privately held, et cetera. Maybe I don't even know technology, but I know that I need some technology somehow to make my stuff go better. How do I know that I've hired the right people to oversee these little details that I've forgotten or never knew to even look for, and that somebody has left me vulnerable in a way that I don't even know? Who should I look for? What type of person? Do I look for a programmer? Do I look for a security person? Do I look for a pen tester? Do I look for all of them? Who do I look for to help me make sure that my stuff stays on task and that at the end of the day, my target project is completed correctly?
So I'll start with this one. So I think you hit the nail on the head for one of the things we see quite often. And the answer directly to your question is it depends of whether you're hire a pen tester, a security engineer, a developer. It depends on what you're building. It depends on the starting point. If you're just starting from scratch, I would say, a security engineer. But the main thing we see a lot of organizations focusing on is tool sets. They're looking for that tool that is going to solve everything for them. And where I think you really hit home is what people do you get in. We believe that the people are the most important. And I'm not knocking tools in any way. The tool sets that are out there are doing great things. They're mitigating a lot of issues that folks are seeing. But a tool set, we look at it from the point of a construction person. That tool set is going to be most utilized in the hands of a good security engineer. Somebody that understands. When we look for pen testers, when we look for people from the engineering perspective, I want a well-rounded person. Security can get very niche where somebody's a red teamer for applications or a pen tester for applications or networks. And you need those different folks to cover the areas. But what we really like to see is somebody that's been all over IT from a engineering perspective, from an architecture perspective, from networking, somebody that has a very well-rounded nature in their previous life, and then made that switch to security. That's going to give you a much bigger understanding of how this should be built, and then how this should be built with security, and then recognizing attacks and recognizing things that are not on par for the way they should be. Steve, anything to add to that?
No, those are excellent points, and I think that again, it's the people that are going to matter the most. And not every one person can know so many things that they can cover every area on their own. And Bill had mentioned different folks, programmers and web application engineers and coders and finance folks. Whoever they are, can absolutely play a huge role in security and securing the corporation, especially if we're talking about smaller corporations or entities, small businesses. They can absolutely play a huge role no matter what they do in the company. They can certainly contribute whatever their specialty is to a group of folks who will be running the security effort either internally or externally, and play a very beneficial role to give the other folks an idea of what they know and what they know how to do, because you don't know what you don't know, right? It's one of my favorite sayings. And if you're on a security team and you don't ever get the opportunity to talk to, let's say, the finance folks, then you may not know the applications that they use. You may not understand how they log in either locally or maybe to a cloud-based application that could potentially open your organization up for a front door or a back door opportunity for an attacker. Something simple like that. But yeah, certainly everybody in the organization, no matter how big or small, play a very important role in offering up any kind of information as to specifically what they do that could open up, shed some new light rather on what the security folks could pay attention to.
And then Dave,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, you go right
So
ahead.
I got one thing to add to that as well, as if you're just starting out commercially or even government, you have an application being built, do your research on the companies that you're going to hire. Talk to folks in the industry. One of the things I think new folks that we bring into the team, and we try to bring a lot of our team, if not all of our team, out to DEF CON every year. And some folks that are new to the industry, just out of the military or whatever, mention that they're a little intimidated by the nature of the conference, the hackers, the pure hacker culture, that type of stuff. And when you get involved in it, like we have been in the last couple of years, you realize that this is one of the nicest communities of people to talk to. They're all very willing to help, very willing to lend a hand as you do. So if you are, to your question in the beginning, if you're looking for a firm to come in and help you build up from the ground, talk to people about what you should be looking for within this industry. We see a lot of people selling stuff that they shouldn't be. For instance, we had a government organization that hired us to do a pen test. And while this is the true desire of most testing, when we came in, the lead project manager was like, hey, throw everything you have at us. If you could take us down, take us down. And we're like, well, this is an operational network, so we'll tread lightly and we'll call you before something happens. So within 20 minutes of the pen test, we had full control of everything and were able to take them down. And so I stopped the test and called the project manager and said, hey, we got everything. We could take you down from now. And he called me into his office and we started talking, and he was like, yeah, I got a pen test every year for the last 5 years. So we walk in and he shows me the pen test results for the last 5 years, and they were just vulnerability scans from a common tool, which is a great product to use, but that's not a pen test. That's not truly seeing what the exploitation is. And some companies sold them that for the last 5 years with the price tag of a pen test, and they were only getting a scan on their external vulnerabilities. So, you see stuff like that all the time in the industry, and it makes everybody shake their head. But, it really comes down to doing research as you go along and talking to folks in the industry and see who the players are and see who the ones that everybody's recommending.
Hey, Bill, I'm actually going to add a little bit to that. I think that if you're going to start your search and you have that information behind you, you also need to understand from the folks that, like a minute ago, we were talking about getting a good collaboration amongst all your folks, no matter who they are and what their role is. You really need to understand what it is you're trying to protect. So your infrastructure, internally and externally, the way that I like to look at it is from the outside in and the inside out. So no matter how far down the rabbit hole your network goes, if what you're trying to protect lives on, let's just say, a Windows server, and you have to get, 10, 12 devices through the network to actually get to that server and get to that information, you should really have a good handle on what those devices are, how they talk to each other, what protocols they're running, and who and where and why has access to that information. If you understand your infrastructure and what it is you're trying to protect, then you can really start to narrow down, okay, who do I really need to hire here? If I need a full-blown penetration test, possible. Do I just need to start focusing on some penetration or security reviews on my Windows server and then work my way out backwards? Then that may be a good option also. And then from the outside in, if you're running web applications, then certainly you're going to want to have somebody who has a very good understanding of application code such as Java, HTML5, things like that, and then kind of focus how folks could potentially get to your infrastructure from a web application and to the inside to that same Windows server that we were talking about just a moment ago. So if you understand all the components, then you'll definitely get a better idea of who you may need to hire and what you want to, start taking a look at to protect your information and your infrastructure for sure.
Well, you guys certainly seem to hit it. I know that in my career I've always stressed highly that both thing, whether it be assets or physical devices, and data needs to be identified and classified as to what it is, what it does, how important is it, et cetera. So you guys certainly brought that up, maybe not using those words, but it was clear that identification and classification is something that you deem important, as do I. And I wanted to take a quick minute to go back to something that Steve said, just for fun, and to take a little stab there at Mr. Kimball, and that was, Steve, you mentioned that nobody knows everything, but I thought Marines thought they were God. So
well, there's always one exception to the rule,
right? I will not comment on that one.
So we've talked about a wide range of things, and one of the things I want to try to tie in, since clearly you guys do a lot of government level stuff, that's probably a bad way to say it, but what would you say or suggest to a small or medium-sized private industry organization? What would you say these companies should take a look at and take away from how the government views their stuff? I mean, we have NIST and ISO and High Trust and HIPAA and a boatload of other control sets that people can look at and say, I map to that. But honestly, not everything applies to everybody in the same way. Even the same paragraph might not even apply to the same way to two different organizations. So if there's a small business owner here that's worried that their company's going to get compromised, he can't afford 2 weeks of downtime with his data not being available to him because it would shut his company down. What type of techniques or strategies at maybe a 10,000 foot level would you suggest that they start with, and then what kind of maybe goals should they have for the long term?
Certainly, I'll go ahead and start on that. So you did, you brought up compliance framework. So we in the government work a lot in the NIST cybersecurity framework, the risk management framework, and then commercially ISO 27001, PCI, HIPAA, those type of frameworks. To your point, they are a great starting point. I know compliance gets a lot of negative press in the security industry because a lot of folks, especially in the government, look at compliance as if you're compliant, you're secure. We all know in the security industry that is not true. Compliance is a measurement in time. If you're compliant, no system is going to be 100% compliant. But let's say you were on day one, tomorrow. You're compliant tomorrow and only tomorrow. The next patch that comes out or something that you're not updated, you're no longer compliant and things start to fall apart. So a lot of it comes to maintenance and keeping that type of stuff up. From a small organization perspective of what you are looking at, what we like to do is we actually have a 12-step process for our security framework that kind of mixes all of those compliance factors. But the most important one that we start with, step one is the requirements and the risk assessment and the risk measurement. So it's really lining up your assets of here's what I have, here's the risk I'm willing to accept within each of these assets. So I am building a company that has this differentiator. This is my product. This is what I need to protect the most, the data that's evolved around that. That's where you really start. You start protecting that, and then you build the defense in depth out around that. But start with your priorities and work your way out. Everybody understands that there's budgets. Not everybody can hire the best tool, the best engineer as you go along, the best third party. So you really need to prioritize your risk of here's what I really need to protect, and then as the budget increases or as things increase, I start and work my way out there. Steve, anything to add to that?
Yep, absolutely. Again, great points, Bill. And what you're really doing in the long run, in the short term, by doing that, following those strategies, is minimizing your attack surface, right? And that's just one of the benefits of working in that fashion. And I'll give you an audience a tip that we give, a little piece of advice to help minimize your attack surface, especially if you're a private organization with folks who love to go on Twitter and use social media, Facebook, whatever. And these accounts are monitored, by some nefarious folks, and they can get some pretty good information out there. And one of the best ways to gain entry, especially into a small private organization, is through leaked passwords and usernames, right? So it's a good idea, and we recommend this all the time, to monitor sites and monitor breaches for leaked usernames and passwords. That can be an instant win for an attacker trying to get into your organization, whether that be logging into your VPN or logging into whatever services that you might have that you want to keep away from prying eyes. They can get in with this username or password. One of the places that we highly recommend taking a look at, it's on GitHub. It's free of charge right now, and I apologize to the author because I cannot remember their name, but the tool is PwnDB, PWNDB, and it is linked to Tor and has access to a number of databases that have been breached, have leaked username and passwords in the clear. Some are hashed, some are not. But it is a great place to start, and by monitoring some of these files and tools such as PwnDB is a great head start into protecting your infrastructure and securing your information or whatever mechanisms that you're trying to safeguard. It's an easy win. It continues to be an easy win, and we like to get the message out that it's something that really needs to be monitored. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take some dedication to sit down daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, and search for these things. And if you have some resources laying around somewhere that you can create a script to go out there and take a look at these and check them against your Active Directory or whatever is taking care of your employee resource management. then you can give yourself a decent head start against that attack avenue for sure.
Right on. And, yep, I can't remember that guy's name either. I know it's David because we share the same first name, but I can't think of his last name to save my life. So I apologize to you, David, as well for not recalling your last name, but by the time this interview is over with, I'll have your last name, and I'll make sure I tweet it out at everybody. So, I want to kind of circle back a little bit. So we've used a lot of terms over the last few minutes. And we talked about government stuff. We talked about some private stuff. We talked about Marines being gods. We've talked about a lot of stuff. Two of the terms that you guys have thrown out are red team and blue team. Now, most of us in the field know what that means. Red teamers are the theoretical outside hackers trying to see what they can do to get in. And the blue team would theoretically be your inside IT or IS services people trying to stop the bad guys from getting in. Over the last, let's restrict it to say the last year, maybe 18 months, have you seen a shift or a substantial change in some of the red team or true hacker methodologies and capabilities that those on the inside should actually start paying more attention to or make sure that we learn about how to defend against? Is there anything that really jumps out at you like, oh crap, we've never seen this before, but this last year has been kind of interesting?
So I'll tell you that over the past few years, including the last year, what we've seen is we've seen kind of a change in the behavior of the folks that we do these types of services for. And when we go into a penetration test, we'll just jump back, 3 or 4 years ago. We didn't really see, I don't want to say the importance wasn't, solidified from the customer's point of view, but we've seen a trend up in interest as these exploits are more commonly, displayed on the news networks and more commonly thrown out into news feeds and RSS feeds or whatever. The attention, I guess, is upticking from their perspective. And what we're noticing is internal penetration testing. We're noticing more internal vulnerability scans. We're noticing more resources being pushed forward to identify really critical parts, maybe not all of the internal infrastructure or web applications for external infrastructure, but the important ones, like your database servers, maybe your Oracle servers, maybe, your SCADA devices or what have you that might be the most critical. They're certainly paying more attention to those, and they're realizing that, hey, this is kind of a constant thing. We're getting attacked more and more, maybe not them, but, just in general around the world. Devices, components, bots are a big thing. They go out and they scrub and look for open ports and services, and the more devices that are added to the network with these organizations, they catch them pretty quick. And I think that what we're seeing is more attention is being raised, awareness is being raised to say, this is something we really should do, and we've noticed that they are starting to do it more and more. So internal penetration testing, you say red team and blue team, and we have to talk about collaboration again. One really isn't any good without the other. They both really need to collaborate to solidify what is the actual problem, where our front doors are, where our back doors are, where are we weak with credentials, things like that. But we absolutely have seen awareness, we've seen more attention, and we've seen more importance pushed towards internal testing prior to us coming to actually perform our engagements, which is it's a very good thing. It's a very good thing for everybody because, like I mentioned before, you don't know what you don't know. And if you run these types of internal tests and get yourself a leg up, at least you're confident with what you know is wrong. And you shouldn't be surprised with some of the stuff that we come up with. But, there's the unknowns. There's new findings every day, and new methods, are created all the time. And you can't always protect against everything. But to answer, your question, it's definitely a higher awareness and higher importance over the past year or two.
Right on. And for those listening that may not, again, know all the terms, Steve brought up a point about your internal defenders, your blue teamers, and your red team organizations or outside third parties working together. And sometimes that's referred to as a purple team, where both sides of the coin are working collaboratively. So if you hear the term purple team, that's usually what it means, although who knows, somebody else might apply a different definition to that. Along those lines, and we're coming up on our time here, it seems like when you get into these interviews, you just get started, you're like, wow, do we have enough to talk about for this entire time? And then you get to the end, you're like, I haven't asked half my questions. So as we talked about new things that have happened, what are your views or opinions, whatever, about some time ago when the NSA hacking tools got compromised and released, and then all of a sudden the NSA turns around and makes Ghidra an open source platform through GitHub? You know, how has the NSA and you mentioned earlier, I think Bill might mention earlier about how DEF CON was always like this subculture, and if you weren't wearing a hoodie with a mask on, you weren't allowed in. And now, you know, some of these organizations are proactively participating. I know we had DARPA there this year with the voting booths. That didn't seem to work, but, you know, organizations are being more involved. So how do you view what we all thought, we being hackers, and if you think about it from the dark side, what we thought the NSA was all about, compared to maybe how they're viewed today and they're openly releasing their tools, or did they just release the tools because it was already out there anyway and they were trying to make themselves look good?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the point there of why are they making it open source? Why are they releasing it to that? And, you know, that's an answer you're going to have to be involved in there to truly understand. But I think it is what you brought up about, you know, the culture, the culture of if something can be engineered, it can be reverse engineered. And, you know, if, you know, the hack all the things culture from DEF CON and DerbyCon and those type of conferences, I think you're going to see a lot of that coming forth where these tools are going to be available. I mean, that's why these tools are created. You know, the tools, if you look at it on the surface of, you know, the nature, they're used to exploit things. You know, these tools are created to break into places. And if something is going to get released, you might as well release it so it becomes part of the common good. You know, and I think that's a lot of the lines of where that tool getting released, getting put into open source package and everything comes to is, if it's going to be out there, might as well use it to allow the common good, allow people to use it to defend their networks through an offensive nature. So I think, just as Steve brought up in the other statement, as we are seeing, you know, when we first started this company, people would be like, well, what's a pen test? Explain it to me. You know, the folks in the IT community and the security community knew, but as you go into businesses, as you go into, you know, government customers, they're like, what's a pen test? You want to hack me? You know, where that has kind of shifted to, we're getting asked, I want a pen test. I want it on this section. You know, I know what I'm looking for at this point, or the education's coming around. And I think just as we in the community, the IT community, the hacking community over the years have had all these open source tools to use, we're starting to see that come to fruition as a platform for everybody. So I think it's a changing in education, changing in understanding of the field to where those things are coming out.
Should we still be afraid of the NSA watching our email? I won't make you answer that. I'm just teasing. Knowing that you're probably involved in some indirect or direct level, I'm just teasing. They're always watching, so that's the rule that I put out to everybody is just assume they are until you're proven otherwise. But
yeah,
that's
I think everybody's always watching.
That's right. Exactly right. All right, guys. So we're coming up to the end of this. Is there anything that is going on for you, even individually and personally, or as an organization, that you want to promote, to make sure that you give folks some contact info, how to track you down if you want to be tracked down, or if they want to track you down? And let's end this thing with with thank yous and how to reach out to you guys. So the floor is yours to talk about any topic you want to talk about.
Thanks. So first, Dave, I wanted to thank you for having us on. It was great to meet you at DEF CON this year, and I'm going to hold you to it to make sure that you come to VetCon next year. Maybe we'll have a little platform for you specifically to make sure that you get there, and then I'll certainly get you that coin out. But as far as reaching out to the company, we're based in Northern Virginia, the D.C. metro area, kind of the headquarters, the focus of the government. We're always looking for good folks to join the team. Like I said, we're about 70% veteran staffed. All of our teammates are, we equal about 70%. We have several people coming on soon that I think is even going to add to that percentage. I think they're all veterans. So we like to recruit from the veteran community. It's certainly not the only community that we recruit from, but veterans kind of have the mindset for security, whether it's going from attacking a building to attacking a network, protecting a perimeter to protecting a perimeter of an enterprise. The principles are still there, so it's something we're very interested in bringing to our company. Like I said, we're located in the DC metro area. Our Twitter is CDT LLC. You can reach us at info@cyberdefensetechnologies.com. The rest of the website is cyberdefensetechnologies.com. So, we really appreciate the time today and appreciate you having us out. And we look forward to hearing more of your interviews, and look forward to seeing you at VetCon next year.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you guys. It was great to meet you guys out there, and it sucks to go all the way to Vegas to meet somebody that's, not quite my backyard, but pretty close. So now that I know who you are, we all can work through great things and try to promote a lot of different things. We can help government as much as they might need help. We can help these small businesses that definitely need help, and then even introduce some new folks into the InfoSec world and bring them along. So I appreciate you both. And for those of you who missed any part of this, of course, you can check us out on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and just about any place on the internet that has a podcast. You can also come visit me at bringyourown.security.net. Hit me up at BYOS Radio on Twitter if you would like to. And other than that, stay tuned as we go throughout the next year, because we will certainly be bringing both Steve and William back on to talk about next year's DEF CON and any more important things that come up. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.